Renegade Aviator here in Tucson, Arizona for a very special visit to the Pima Air and Space Museum with a special invitation to a museum inside a museum, the 390th Memorial Museum. We're going to have a chance to hear from a 102-year-old aviator of 3 wars. And I screwed up. I thought that I had lost this footage, but thankfully we're able to bring this to you today. You will not want to miss this episode, so stay to the end.
This is the 390th Memorial at Pima Air and Space, and this is what it's all about. It's not just about the equipment, it's about the men. We are the world's greatest one-airplane museum. We have a single B-17 here. So the 390th Bomb Group was deployed to England in World War II as part of the 8th Air Force. They arrived in the summer of '43 and were there for about 20 months of combat. The unit flew 301 combat missions in the B-17. In that time, 144 B-17s were shot down. Another 32 lost operationally. That's 646 young men killed in action. Another 729 became prisoners of war, all from this one unit. So that's what this place is really about, is these young men who sacrificed so much for our freedoms. The average age of the enlisted men was about 19 years old. The officers in charge of them, about 21 years old. So this is really a tribute to the men of the 8th Air Force.
Dreams come true. See that little boy in the photo? Well, you just listen to him. Alexander Chambers, Business and Operations Manager of the 390th. Pretty cool. The B-17 Flying Fortress was renowned for its survivability, with countless instances where the aircraft managed to return home despite suffering severe damage. Climbing inside one of these today gives you a glimpse of what those crews experienced. This is the aircraft flown by the man who will share his story with us today. Colonel Richard Bushong, a lifetime of 3 wars. Over 102 years old when we did this interview, but it all started with a young man of only 20 years old.
Good morning, folks. I'm the old guy. I'm only 102. I don't think that's very old. So I got to fly 28 missions over Germany. And I flew 7 different B-17. All of them were destroyed. And my first war was World War II. Got a tour in Vietnam. That was my last war. My little ball turret gunner, he's the only guy that can see the bottom of the airplane. He called in, we got oil running off the wing behind number 1. So I said, well, how fast is it running? And he said, well, it's a steady stream, but it's not a gusher. So I kept that engine running as we proceeded toward home. The lead group in the line diverted around this big high cloud. Well, everybody then, when they got there, they turned and diverted around it also. The diversion took us right over a German fighting base. Not a good place to be. Every airplane in the formation was getting hit. We just got hit in number 2 and number 3 engine, and they're both gushing oil. All of a sudden, about 4 minutes after we left that place, an arm came over my shoulder and hit number 2 feather, and the prop feathered, and I shut that engine down. As soon as I shut that engine down, no more warm air, and boom, everything in the cockpit frosted up. Now I was in formation. I couldn't see the other airplanes. I knew I had to get out of there or I'm going to start banging on airplanes. So I raised up and then I backed out of the formation. Now I'm a wounded airplane in enemy territory all by myself. So I had number 1 making oil but still running. Number 2 is feathered and shut down. Number 3 the engine shut down, but the prop is torn loose from the engine, and it's out here spinning, and a lot of drag for me. I had to push that thing through the rear. And number 4 was a good engine, and we're still in enemy territory. So there was a lot of praying going on in that airplane. If number 1 quit, we had to get out of the airplane. So I had the crew all ready to bail out if we were over land. I said, if we're over water, I will not bail the crew out. I will land the airplane in the water. I didn't want to bail them out because there'd be 10 heads out there floating around and we'd all die out there in the North Sea. And I'd been pretty slow with only 2 engines running and 1 windmilling. So the other guys that had more engines than I did beat me home. So they were circling the land as soon as I got within sight of the airfield. I finally got it on the final approach to the airfield. And I got it on the runway, going 80 miles an hour. Hit the brakes, and they weren't in. Brakes were shot up. Now, our runway was only 6,300 feet, so I had about a mile left. I was still a couple hundred yards from the end, and I forced the airplane to grounding. I put full power on number 1 engine and made it turn off the runway. Thank God for English blood. Good old gooey English blood. Grabbed the wheels on that airplane. It just stopped dead. We climbed out, the 10 of us. 1 man had been wounded, but he was patched up, so he was okay. We were standing out front looking at this wreck that brought us home. And just being so thankful that we had made it back home to England. The crew chiefs were always watching when the group came home. So the crew chief for that one that I was flying, he took 1 look at that airplane and he said, "Golly, Lieutenant, what'd you do to my airplane?" And I said, "Now let's get that part straight. I didn't do any of that. The Germans did that." 25 days later, it was totally repaired, and it flew a mission, and it was shot down, and 8 were killed, and 2 were taken prisoner. I was so lucky. It was unbelievable. And I got sick one night, and I went into the flight surgeon's office, and he said, "I think you have yellow jaundice, so you're spending the night here, and tomorrow you're going to the hospital." And the next day, they threw me in an ambulance, and I went to an army hospital, and they put me in a ward with a whole bunch of yellow guys because he thought I had yellow jaundice. Well, I was in that ward a couple of weeks, and I didn't turn yellow. And the doc kept checking me. Finally, he said, "Well, you don't have it, and whatever you had when you came in here, you're over that now. I'm releasing you back to duty." And I opened the door, turned the light on. There were 12 beds. 11 of the mattresses were rolled up with no bedding on them. My bed was over in the corner, and it was still made. And I said, "Where did you move my crew?" They were right there in that hut. And he said, "Oh, your crew was shot down." Wow, what a shock that was. All 3 of those crews in my Quonset hut had been shot down while I was gone for a couple of weeks. I was the co-pilot, 20 years old. The pilot was a real old guy. He was 26. Then we started flying regularly, and it would be every 2-3 days we'd go on a mission. Oh boy, scary as hell. Now the last few missions I got, some extra guys that I had worked with before. And I was 21 years old by that time, and I got checked out by the operations officer as first pilot, and I had my own crew. I was in command. I got in a seat the first day, the left seat is the pilot seat. I got in there and sat down, and I thought, holy mackerel, I'm in charge of this airplane and this crew, and I'm 21 years old. I know some kids back home that are the same age I am, that I wouldn't even let them drive my car. But there I am, in command of this airplane. I never got home without holes in my airplane. I got hit every time I went up. But it was important. So the 30th of May, 1944, we went home on a troop ship. I put on the harbor at New York and said, oh, boy, was I glad to do that. That was the USA. Yeah. I was so glad to get there. Then I got 2 weeks off to go show off my medals. Some people just don't know when to quit. When I finally did retire, my retirement order said total military service, 32 years and 8 days. But questions about any of the airplanes.
This is more about, I guess, crews. Did you see a difference in, as we age, right? We always think that the younger generation doesn't have what it takes, but you were there, in World War II, right? I mean, so a major world war.
Yeah.
Did you see those next generations moving forward? Did you see radical changes in that, or is it still the same?
Yes, but they acclimated in the service. They acclimated, or they didn't succeed. But somebody that got in and worked hard in their job and paid attention and was had good discipline, he succeeded. He got promoted, and that was good. But that was pretty tough.
How difficult was it in crosswinds to land, or?
It was a little difficult, but we learned how to drop one wing, land it on one wheel in a strong crosswind. I didn't have any problem with it.
390th.org. Get a copy of Colonel Bushong's book. It's absolutely humbling to meet true heroes like this. Climbing into the B-17 after listening to Colonel Bushong carries some weight with it. What these young men did day after day still amazes me. To rise above the horror of war, raise a family, and contribute to society with a smile is true courage. Inside a B-17 Flying Fortress during a bombing mission, conditions were brutal. Crews flew at altitudes above 20,000 feet where temperatures often dropped to 40 degrees below zero. The aircraft was unpressurized, forcing airmen to rely on heavy flight gear and oxygen masks. Noise from the 4 radial engines were constant and deafening. Turbulence, flak burst, and enemy fighters added constant danger. Gunners stood exposed in cramped positions while the bomber formation pressed toward the target. Despite the cold, fear, and exhaustion, crews relied on discipline, teamwork, and courage to complete their mission and bring the aircraft home, hopefully. The 390th Memorial Museum honors the legacy of the 390th Bombardment Group, an 8th Air Force B-17 unit that flew combat missions over Europe during World War II. Located on the grounds of the Pima Air and Space Museum, the museum preserves the history of the crews who flew the B-17 Flying Fortress in some of the war's most dangerous bombing campaigns. Exhibits include a restored B-17G, artifacts, photographs, and personal stories that bring the air war over Europe to life. The museum also maintains extensive archives and research collections dedicated to the men who served, ensuring their courage and sacrifice continue to educate and inspire future generations. Oh, and don't miss the one-of-a-kind bomber jacket display. The B-17 crews were a special breed. They didn't have a choice to go to war, but they decided to climb into these aircraft mission after mission until they were killed, captured, or by the grace of God, survived the arbitrary number of missions assigned. It blows my mind that the B-17 first flew in 1935, and just 17 years later, the jet-powered B-52 took its first flight. Only 10 years after World War II ended, the United States fielded a bomber designed for the nuclear age, and incredibly, the B-52 may still be flying a century after its first flight. And with the X-15 there, just a note, the hypersonic flight research enabled spaceflight, advanced materials, re-entry physics, and control. Hey guys and gals, thanks for watching. And look, this short video really doesn't do justice to the 390th Memorial Museum. It's just a glimpse of what's preserved here. So when you have the chance, I strongly encourage you to come and see it for yourself. Most importantly, thanks to the dedicated volunteers who keep history alive, and to the brave men of the 390th Bombardment Group whose service and sacrifice made it possible. Their story deserves to be remembered. But let this stand as a warning to anyone who would send our finest into harm's way. Make damn sure the terrible cost of war is never in vain. America must lead the world by example, liberty, responsibility, and strength. A strong nation defends itself without apology, but our power and our sons and daughters must never be wasted in slaughter or sent serving an empire. If we're ever forced to fight, it must be for freedom, and it must be worthy of their sacrifice. Comment, like, and share. This is David Costa, State of the End. I am the Renegade Aviator. See ya.
Okay, well, the life of a renegade aviator is pretty much like other pilots. You know, we stay in hotel rooms.
From the Pima
you know,
Aerospace
have bathrooms.
Museum and the 390th.
Normal, just like at your house.
This is David Costa.
But then, you know,
I am
renegade
the
aviators,
Renegade Aviators.
like myself, sometimes we enjoy a little bit more pleasantries of a dining room. I'm working, look, there's a computer over there, I'm doing stuff. And there's a living room, and of course you got a bar area with a kitchen back there, and a nice, you know, an area to greet the many fans of the Renegade Aviator. Got to have a greeting area there. But, you know, the Renegade Aviator, sometimes, you know, we get tired at the end of the day. So, you know what, if you're going to hang with me, you have to have at least a private pool area as part of your hotel room, because, you know, I mean, we can't just stay in a regular hotel. So at the end of the day, the Renegade Aviator gets to relax. It's a tough life being a pilot. It's really tough. Anyway, this is David Costa. I am the Renegade Aviator. See ya.